He publicly shamed a teen intern over a small mistake, until a quiet manager stepped in, said just one sentence, and sacrificed his career to show us what real leadership and integrity look like. The conference room at Meridian Financial fell silent as Vice President Marcus Blackwood's voice rose to a level that could probably be heard 3 floors down. His face was red with rage, his expensive suit somehow making his fury look even more intimidating as he towered over the trembling 17-year-old intern sitting at the far end of the mahogany table. "This is exactly the kind of incompetence I've come to expect from your generation," Blackwood snarled, his words cutting through the air like shards of glass. Lazy, entitled, and completely incapable of following simple instructions. Emma Chen, the summer intern who had started at Meridian just 2 weeks ago, looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Her hands shook as she clutched a stack of papers, the quarterly reports she'd been asked to organize and distribute for this morning's executive meeting. Reports that, through a simple misunderstanding of the filing system, had been arranged by date instead of department. It was a mistake any new employee might make, the kind of error that typically warranted a gentle correction and a brief explanation of the proper procedure. But Marcus Blackwood had never been known for gentle corrections. "Do you have any idea," Blackwood continued, his voice dripping with contempt, "how much money your stupidity has cost this company this morning? We've had 12 executives sitting here for 20 minutes while you scrambled to fix your mess. That's roughly $3,000 in wasted salary, not counting the opportunity cost of delayed decisions." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, determined not to give Blackwood the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Around the table, the other executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked embarrassed by the display, others seemed almost entertained by the spectacle. None of them spoke up, except for David Park. David had been with Meridian Financial for 8 years, working his way up from entry-level analyst to regional manager through a combination of quiet competence and genuine care for his team. At 34, he was one of the younger people in the room, but his reputation for integrity and results had earned him respect throughout the company. He was also known for being soft-spoken, preferring to lead by example rather than grand gestures. In 8 years, no one could remember David ever raising his voice or confronting a superior in public. He was the kind of manager who solved problems behind closed doors, who protected his people through careful navigation of corporate politics rather than direct confrontation. But watching a grown man humiliate a teenage intern over a filing error was testing every principle David had ever held about leadership and human decency. "Furthermore," Blackwood was saying, warming to his theme, "this kind of careless mistake tells me everything I need to know about your work ethic. You probably spent more time on your phone this morning than actually paying attention to your assigned tasks. Am I right?" Emma shook her head frantically. "No, sir. I was here early, and I thought I understood the filing system, but—" "Don't make excuses," Blackwood snapped. "Take responsibility for your failures. That's what adults do, though I suppose expecting maturity from someone who probably can't even vote yet is asking too much." The cruelty in his voice was palpable. This wasn't professional criticism, it was personal attack designed to humiliate and break down a young person who was still learning. David had heard enough. He cleared his throat and stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. The sound drew everyone's attention, including Blackwood's. "Marcus," David said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the room despite its low volume. "She's 17 years old." That was all he said. 5 words, 17 syllables, but they landed in the conference room like a thunderclap. The silence that followed was deafening. Blackwood turned to face David, his expression shifting from anger to surprise to something that looked distinctly like calculation. "Excuse me?" Blackwood said, his voice suddenly cold and controlled. David didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Those 5 words had said everything that needed to be said. They carried within them an entire philosophy about leadership, about power, about the responsibility that comes with authority. They were a reminder that Emma wasn't just an employee. She was a teenager, probably working her first real job, trying to learn and contribute in an environment that should have been nurturing her growth, not destroying her confidence. "Did you have something else to add, David?" Blackwood asked, his tone making it clear that David had just crossed a line. David met his gaze steadily. "Just that mistakes are learning opportunities, especially for someone who's been here 2 weeks." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Everyone present understood the dynamics at play. David Park, a mid-level manager, had just called out Marcus Blackwood, a vice president and one of the most feared executives in the company, in front of a room full of witnesses. In the cutthroat world of corporate finance, Such challenges to authority were rarely forgotten and never forgiven. I see, Blackwood said slowly. Well, since you seem so concerned about learning opportunities, perhaps you'd like to take personal responsibility for ensuring that our intern here receives proper guidance. I'm sure you can spare the time from your other duties. It was a trap, and everyone in the room knew it. Blackwood was essentially assigning David to babysit the intern, a task that would be seen as beneath a regional manager's responsibilities and would likely interfere with his ability to focus on his actual job duties. In the competitive environment at Meridian, falling behind on performance metrics was often a career death sentence. David understood the implications perfectly, but he also understood something else. Sometimes doing the right thing required accepting consequences. I'd be happy to, he said simply. Emma looked up at him with a mixture of gratitude and concern. Even at 17, she was smart enough to recognize that David had just put himself at risk to protect her. Excellent, Blackwood said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure it will be a very educational experience for both of you. The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Emma quietly corrected the filing error during a brief recess, and the quarterly reports were distributed properly. Business proceeded as usual, but beneath the surface, everyone understood that something significant had just happened. After the meeting, David found Emma in the break room, staring into a cup of coffee with the 1,000-yard stare of someone processing a traumatic experience. You okay? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. Emma looked up, her eyes still red around the edges. I'm so sorry, Mr. Park. I didn't mean for you to get in trouble because of me. I thought I understood how the filing system worked, but there were so many different ways to organize things, and... Emma, David interrupted gently. Stop. You made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes, especially when they're learning something new. That's normal. What happened in there wasn't about your mistake. It was about someone choosing to be cruel when they could have chosen to be kind. But now you're stuck training me, and I know you have important work to do, and... Emma. David's voice was firm but warm. Working with you isn't a punishment. It's an opportunity. You're smart, you're eager to learn, and you care about doing good work. Those are exactly the qualities this company should be developing, not tearing down. Over the next few weeks, David made good on his promise. He integrated Emma into his team's projects, teaching her not just the technical aspects of financial analysis, but the softer skills of professional communication, project management, and workplace navigation. Emma proved to be a quick learner with sharp analytical skills and an intuitive understanding of client needs. But David's protection of Emma came at a cost that became increasingly clear as the weeks passed. Blackwood began excluding David from high-level strategy meetings, claiming his mentoring duties meant he was too busy to focus on strategic initiatives. Projects that should have been assigned to David's team were redirected to other managers. When quarterly performance reviews came around, David found himself criticized for lack of initiative and decreased contribution to department goals. The message was clear. Challenging Marcus Blackwood had consequences, and those consequences would continue until David either fell in line or found himself pushed out of the company. David's team members watched the situation unfold with growing concern. They knew their manager was being unfairly targeted, but the corporate culture at Meridian discouraged speaking up about such issues. Those who challenged the hierarchy often found themselves on the receiving end of similar treatment. But Emma noticed everything. She saw how David's workload was being manipulated, how he was being systematically excluded from opportunities he'd previously been included in, and she felt responsible. Mr. Park, she said one afternoon, approaching his desk with obvious reluctance. I think I should quit. David looked up from the financial model he'd been working on. Why would you want to do that? Because of what's happening to you. Mr. Blackwood is punishing you for defending me, and it's not fair. If I quit, maybe things will go back to normal for you. David leaned back in his chair, studying Emma's earnest face. What do you think you've learned during your time here? The question caught Emma off guard. I've learned about financial analysis and project management and client relations. I've learned about how businesses operate and how to work as part of a team. And what do you think I've learned? Emma frowned, uncertain where he was going with this. I've learned, David continued, that some things are more important than career advancement. I've learned that protecting people who can't protect themselves is worth more than a promotion or a bonus. I've learned that the kind of leader I want to be is someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's costly. He stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Emma, in 20 years, no one is going to remember the quarterly reports from this summer. No one is going to care about the performance metrics or the departmental rankings, but you'll remember how you were treated when you made a mistake. And I'll remember whether I had the courage to do the right thing when it mattered. But your career, my career will be what I make of it. If Meridian Financial doesn't value the kind of leadership I believe in, then maybe Meridian Financial isn't the right place for me. 3 months later, David's concerns proved prophetic. His annual review was devastating, filled with criticisms that seemed designed more to justify a predetermined decision than to provide legitimate feedback. His project assignments continued to be limited to low-visibility work, and he was passed over for a promotion that everyone agreed he deserved. Emma, meanwhile, had thrived under David's mentorship. Her summer internship had been extended into a part-time position during the school year, and she was already being courted by several top universities for their business programs. Her work had caught the attention of clients and senior managers throughout the company. Everyone except Marcus Blackwood, who seemed determined to pretend she didn't exist. The end came in November, during a reorganization that Blackwood claimed was necessary for optimizing departmental efficiency. David's position was eliminated, and while he was offered a role with another team, it was a significant step down in responsibility and salary. "I think we both know what this is really about," David told Emma during what would be his final week at Meridian. "Blackwood has been looking for an excuse to push me out ever since that meeting, and now he's found one." "It's not fair," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're the best manager in this company. Everyone knows it. Fairness is a luxury in corporate America," David replied with a rueful smile. "But that doesn't mean we stop trying to do what's right." David's last day at Meridian was marked by an unusual occurrence. Instead of the typical quiet departure that accompanied most resignations, nearly 30 employees from across different departments showed up to say goodbye. They shared stories about how David had helped them, mentored them, and protected them from various forms of workplace bullying and unfairness. "You set an example for all of us," said Sarah Williams, a junior analyst who had worked on David's team for 2 years. "You showed us that being a good person and being a good manager aren't mutually exclusive. You taught me that leadership isn't about having power over people," added Marcus Thompson, a senior associate. "It's about using whatever power you have to lift people up." Even executives from other departments came by to express their respect for David's character and their regret at losing him. The outpouring of support was remarkable in a company culture that typically discouraged such displays of sentiment. Notably absent from the farewell gathering was Marcus Blackwood. Emma was among the last to say goodbye. "I have something for you," she said, handing David a thick envelope. Inside was a letter of recommendation she had written, along with copies of emails from clients praising her work and contributions to various projects. "I don't understand," David said. "I've been accepted to early admission at Stanford," Emma explained. "Full scholarship. But I also got an internship offer at Goldman Sachs for next summer, and they want me to start part-time in the spring while I finish high school." David's face broke into a genuine smile. "Emma, that's incredible. Congratulations." "But here's the thing," Emma continued. "When Goldman Sachs called to make the offer, they said they'd been following my work here at Meridian. Apparently, some of our clients have been talking about the quality of analysis coming out of our team, and they specifically mentioned my contributions." She paused, emotion creeping into her voice. "They said they were impressed not just with my technical skills, but with my professionalism and maturity. They said it was clear I'd been well mentored." David felt a lump forming in his throat. "You earned that opportunity, Emma. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I know I earned it. But I also know I couldn't have earned it without you. You didn't just teach me about finance. You taught me about integrity, about standing up for what's right, about the kind of person I want to be." 6 months after leaving Meridian, David had found a position at a smaller investment firm that specialized in sustainable investing. The salary was slightly lower than what he'd been making at Meridian, but the work was more meaningful, and the company culture emphasized collaboration and ethical behavior over cutthroat competition. Emma thrived at Stanford, where she double-majored in economics and public policy. Her summer internship at Goldman Sachs led to a full-time offer, but she surprised everyone by turning it down to work for a nonprofit organization focused on financial literacy education in underserved communities. "I want to use what I've learned to help people," she explained to David during one of their regular phone conversations. "You taught me that success isn't just about making money. It's about making a difference." 3 years later, Emma founded her own consulting firm that specialized in helping small businesses and startups navigate the complex world of finance and investment. Her reputation for ethical practices and genuine care for her clients' success attracted attention from major corporations looking for partners who shared their values. One of her first major contracts was with David's sustainable investing firm. "It's funny how things work out," David said during a project meeting in Emma's downtown office. "Here you are, the CEO of your own company, and I'm the one asking for your expertise." "You're not asking for my expertise," Emma replied with a smile. "You're collaborating with someone you helped create. There's a difference." The story of what happened in that conference room at Meridian Financial became something of a legend in their professional circles. Not because of the dramatic confrontation or the corporate politics, but because of what it revealed about the power of simple human decency. David's 5 words, "She's 17 years old," had served as a reminder that behind every employee, every mistake, every moment of professional interaction, there was a human being deserving of basic respect and dignity. It was a principle that seemed obvious but was often forgotten in the pressure cooker environment of corporate America. Marcus Blackwood, meanwhile, continued his rise through the corporate hierarchy at Meridian Financial. He became senior vice president, then executive vice president, accumulating power and influence through a combination of aggressive tactics and political maneuvering. But his reputation for cruelty preceded him wherever he went. Talented employees avoided his department, clients complained about his abrasive style, and turnover in his division was consistently higher than anywhere else in the company. The short-term gains from his aggressive approach were gradually undermined by long-term costs that became increasingly difficult to ignore. Emma kept track of these developments through professional networks and industry publications, not out of vindictiveness, but out of curiosity about whether the corporate world would eventually hold people accountable for their treatment of others. "You know what I've learned?" she told David during one of their conversations. "Bullies like Blackwood often succeed in the short term because they create fear, and fear can be an effective motivator. But in the long term, organizations that tolerate bullying lose their best people, their innovation, and their competitive edge." "Do you think Meridian will ever figure that out?" David asked. "Maybe, but by the time they do, all the people who could have helped them change will have moved on to better opportunities." Emma's prediction proved accurate. Over the following years, Meridian Financial lost several key clients and struggled to attract top talent. Exit interviews consistently cited toxic management practices and lack of ethical leadership as primary reasons for departure. The company eventually brought in consultants to address their culture problems, but the damage was already done. Many of their best people, including several who had witnessed David's confrontation with Blackwood, had found positions with competitors who valued both performance and character. David, meanwhile, was promoted to partner at his sustainable investing firm, where he built a reputation as someone who could deliver strong returns while maintaining the highest ethical standards. His team was known throughout the industry for their collaborative approach and their commitment to developing junior staff. "You know what's ironic?" Emma observed during a panel discussion they both participated in about ethical leadership in finance. "Blackwood thought he was teaching me a lesson about accountability and professionalism, but the real lesson came from watching you stand up for what was right, even when it cost you." "What lesson was that?" David asked. "That true strength isn't about having power over other people. It's about having the courage to use whatever power you have to protect those who need protection." The audience, a group of young professionals and business students, listened intently as Emma described the incident that had shaped her understanding of leadership. "A lot of people think that defending someone means making a big speech or staging a dramatic confrontation," she said. "But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just remind people of the human dignity that should be at the center of every interaction." She's 17 years old. 5 words that changed everything. In the Q&A session that followed, a young man in the front row raised his hand. "What advice would you give to someone who sees unfairness in their workplace but is afraid to speak up because of the potential consequences?" David and Emma exchanged a look before David answered. "I'd say that the consequences of staying silent are often worse than the consequences of speaking up. When you watch someone being mistreated and do nothing, you become complicit in that mistreatment. You lose a piece of your integrity, and over time, those pieces add up. But practically speaking," Emma added, "you have to be smart about how you stand up for what's right. You can't always stage a dramatic confrontation in a conference room. Sometimes it's about having quiet conversations, building alliances, documenting problems, and finding ways to protect people without destroying yourself in the process. Unless," David said with a slight smile, "you're watching a grown man humiliate a teenager over a filing error. Then sometimes you just have to say something. Consequences be damned." Years later, when business schools began teaching case studies about ethical leadership in corporate environments, the incident at Meridian Financial became a standard example, not because of the dramatic nature of the confrontation, but because of what it revealed about the ripple effects of moral courage. David's willingness to sacrifice his career advancement to protect a young intern had inspired Emma to build her own career around helping others. Emma's success had demonstrated to other young professionals that it was possible to succeed while maintaining integrity. Their example had influenced dozens of other people to make similar choices in their own careers. The ripple effects continued to spread, creating a network of professionals who prioritized ethical behavior and mutual support over cutthroat competition. That's the thing about doing the right thing, David reflected during a recent interview about his career. You never know how far the impact will reach. You just know that in that moment, you have a choice about what kind of person you want to be. And sometimes, Emma added, 5 words are enough to change everything. The story of what happened in that conference room serves as a reminder that real leadership isn't about having the biggest title or the most authority. It's about having the courage to stand up for what's right, especially when it's costly. It's about remembering that behind every professional interaction is a human being deserving of basic dignity and respect. And sometimes it's about being willing to say the simple truth that everyone else is afraid to voice. She's 17 years old. 5 words that silenced a room, ended a career, and started a revolution in how 2 people thought about leadership, integrity, and the responsibility we all have to protect those who cannot protect themselves. In a world that often rewards aggression and punishes compassion, David Park's quiet act of courage stands as proof that doing the right thing isn't always dramatic or heroic. Sometimes it's just being willing to state the obvious truth that everyone else is pretending not to see. Sometimes that's enough to change everything.